Hello! In this lesson, we're going to go through one of my favorite exercises for suppling and loosening up your horse. It's a great exercise to help him relax and release tension, and it's also a great way to work on his balance. This exercise can be done in a relaxed stretching posture as part of your warm-up, and it can also be done in a more engaged posture to work on collection and develop strength in your horse. But either way, it's going to help work on loosening him up, releasing tension all through his body, helping him to engage his body better, and helping him to improve his balance. So the exercise that we're going to do is a spiral in and a spiral out on a circle. So what that means is you're going to start on a large circle, say 20 meters or so, and you're going to gradually work your horse in onto a smaller circle, and then gradually work him back out onto a larger circle. Now the key to this is that you want to use your body to move the horse over, and you want it to be a gradual movement. So what you don't want to do is just take a hold of your inside or outside rein and use that to pull your horse over to the inside or the outside. You're going to use very little with your reins, and you want the movement to come from your seat and your leg. Okay, so let's take a look at what that is going to look like. All right. So here I am walking illustre on a large circle, and then I'm going to think about carrying my seat just slightly over to the inside, and it's a very subtle movement. And you'll see him starting to move smaller and smaller on the circle. You can also use a little bit of pressure from your outside leg if you need to encourage the horse to step over. Now what I want you to notice is that the alignment of Illustre's body is not changing. So now as we move back out here, I'm thinking about carrying my seat over to the outside of the circle, and I can apply slight pressure with my inside leg. But again, you'll notice that the alignment of his body does not change. So what that means is that his front end, his shoulders, and his hind end, his hips, are staying in alignment with each other. And he's staying on the bend of the circle. So I'm not using my reins to move him over. I'm using my seat and my leg. So again, moving him onto a smaller circle here. You see that the alignment of his body does not change. His shoulders and his hips are in alignment, following the same path, and then moving him back out onto the larger circle. Now in a second here, I'm going to show you what it looks like when the horse's body does not stay in alignment, so that you can see the difference and you know what to watch for when you're working on this with your own horse. You can see how light and soft my reins are. So here I'm moving him back in, but you can see how his shoulders came completely out of alignment with his hips, and his shoulders got to the smaller circle before his hips did. Okay, so when the horse is doing the exercise correctly, the shoulders and the hips should stay on the same path. They should be on the same size circle. When he did the exercise that time, his shoulders got ahead of his hips, and his shoulders got onto the smaller circle before his hind end did. So now I'm going to show you going back onto the bigger circle, and again you can see how his shoulders are out of alignment with his hips. He's falling out onto that outside shoulder. So the shoulders reached the larger circle before the hips did. I'm going to show you that again here. So watch his shoulders. You can see how they're ahead of his hind end, and his shoulders are getting to the smaller circle before his hind end is. And then going back out in the bigger circle, you can see again how his shoulders are ahead of his hind end, and his shoulders are getting to the bigger circle first. So these are common issues that you might run into with your horse as you're going through this exercise. So you want to be watching for those. This is an exercise that's going to work on your horse's balance. And if your horse struggles a little bit with balance, he's going to be inclined to fall onto his shoulders. And you may notice that one of these things happens with him. In that case, what you want to do is just really slow down the exercise and remember to think about making your circle smaller very, very gradually, just a little bit at a time. And then same thing as you make your circle bigger, make it very, very gradual. You may also choose to slow down your horse's pace. If the horse is moving in a slower walk, it gives him more time to figure out what he's doing with his feet and how to balance himself. So when in doubt, just slow everything down. Okay, so now I'm going to show it to you again correctly. So you'll see as Illustrate travels closer to the camera here on the smaller circle, his shoulders and his hips stay in alignment and stay on the same path. And then again, as he moves back out, his shoulders and his hips stay on the same path. He's actually still leading a little bit with his shoulders there. So what I could do is slow him down, which I did a little bit there. And you can see his hips stepping more in alignment with the rest of his body. So that's where I say that slowing down is always a good thing and can help the horse to find his balance a little bit better. So when you feel pretty confident at the walk, go ahead and try it at a trot. It's going to be the same idea. Everything just happens a little faster because you're moving faster. So here we're starting to move in on the smaller circle. You can see Illustrate's body staying in alignment and then moving back out. And I'm thinking about moving the horse over from his rib cage and the rest of his body just coming along. Moving him over from the middle rather than his front end or his hind end leading the exercise. You also want to keep in mind that smaller circles are going to be more physically demanding for your horse. So depending on your horse's fitness level, you may choose to not make the circle as small, and you may decide to only stay on the small circle for a brief moment before going back out onto the larger circle. So remember to be realistic with your expectations for your horse based off of his fitness level. And then once you're feeling really confident in the walk or the trot, you can also try it in the canter. Oftentimes when I'm introducing it in the canter, I'll only do a step or two to the inside and then a step or two to the outside. Illustrate schooled this exercise quite a few times before, so he can do more than that. But just a couple steps in the beginning is really good. And even in the trot too, when you're first introducing it, it doesn't have to be a big movement. You can make it really small and subtle. This exercise can also show you how responsive your horse is to your seat and your leg aids. If you can get him to move on to the smaller and larger circles just off of your leg aid. All right. So, some things to remember as you're going through this exercise. You want to gradually make the circle smaller and larger. Keep it slow. Take your time. Think about your horse's weight distribution and his balance. So you want him to stay evenly weighted over his body. You don't want it to feel like he's leaning into the circle or falling to the outside of the circle. And that'll happen if his body is not in alignment, okay? So if his shoulders get ahead as he's making the circle smaller, it's going to feel like he's leaning to the inside, kind of like a motorcycle would. If his shoulders get ahead of him as he's moving to the outside of the circle, making the circle bigger, it's going to feel like he's leaning or falling out on the circle. Okay? So you want to make sure that his weight feels evenly distributed over his legs. And then he's balanced in an upright position rather than tilting side to side. You want him to feel like he's upright. Okay, so keep that in mind, and if you're having difficulties with that, go slower until you and your horse are able to find that correct balance, because this exercise isn't going to do you any good if your horse is out of balance as he's going through it. So finding that correct balance is really key to being successful with this horse, or with this exercise with your horse. Use your seat, leg, and your focus to move the horse over. So we talked about your seat and your leg, but you also want to think about your focus and have a picture in your mind and an idea in your mind of where you want the horse to go and what you want the horse to do. And that's going to help bring clarity to him. As your horse is going around on the circle, you want to maintain the bend of the circle, and you want him to stay in the same tempo. So his walk or trot or canter, whatever pace you're doing, should not change as he's making the circle bigger and smaller. You want to think about keeping a steady tempo as he goes in and out of the exercise. If you notice that his pace does change, it probably means that he's struggling with his balance a little bit, or there's some stiffness or tension in his body that's making the exercise difficult for him to do. So those are some things to take note of. Remember that the smaller circles can be difficult, so use moderation. You don't want to stay on that small circle for too long, especially if you have a horse that's newer to the exercise or isn't very physically fit. This is not an exercise to drill over and over because your horse will get frustrated and bored with it. So a few times in each direction is generally good. This is great exercise for, like I said, suppling your horse as he's moving his body over and shifting his balance to make the circle smaller and larger. It's going to help loosen him up through his entire body, and you should feel your horse start to relax and get a little softer through the exercise. It's also going to work on his balance. Can he remain upright in his balance without tilting to one side or the other, even as he's making the circle smaller or bigger? So he's got to be able to shift his balance so that he can make the circle smaller or bigger without tilting his body. And that can be a challenge for some horses. So this is a really good exercise to work on that. It's also a good exercise to work on more engagement of your horse's body. As he makes that circle smaller, he's going to have to naturally, because of the size of the circle, engage his body a little bit more in order to stay balanced on the circle. So there's a lot of benefits to this exercise. It can be a lot of fun. I use it quite often with my horses. So give it a try and let me know how it goes. Let me know if you have any questions or comments.